Welcome back to Almost Above Average. While America screams at each other about gas stoves, book bans, and your neighbor's pronouns, a trillion-dollar company just built a million-brain AI fortress in a cornfield next to a nuclear plant, and nobody blinked. Welcome back to Almost Above Average, and tonight we're not talking about the cloud. We're talking about the new infrastructure that's going to run your life. And it's not owned by your town, your state, or your country. It's owned by whoever holds the deed to the data center. Look around rural America and something ugly is happening in plain sight.
At least 2 massive AI data centers are being built in Louisiana. This is a rendering of the latest, a $10 billion investment near St. Francisville.
Cornfields are turning into data centers. Quiet towns are turning into compute colonies. Rural grids are being rewired into industrial AI nodes. And farmers aren't selling land to grow food anymore. They're selling it to grow compute.
The undisclosed company wants to buy Dr. Grosser's land and a lot more surrounding it in order to build a massive AI data center.
The data center developer is looking for about 2,000 acres outside of Maysville, including this land. The Grosser's property is just over that ridge, about 250 acres, but as you can see, there's plenty out here from which to choose.
Real quick, thank you very much for watching this video. Would you please subscribe and hit like? Thanks.
A single AI campus can stretch across 1,200 acres, almost 2 square miles, and run on 2 gigawatts of power with fewer than 60 employees. 60 humans overseeing a machine city that drinks more water and electricity than the entire country that surrounds it. Is this sounding like the Matrix? The money doesn't stay local, the jobs don't show up, but the water draw does, the grid strain does, and the price spikes do. One of these colonies doesn't just transform the property line it sits on. It transforms the entire region's reality. The food leaves, the water leaves, the power leaves, and the jobs never come. Should we be worried that 1 million AI chips are sitting next to my drinking water? The short answer, yeah. The longer answer, hell yeah. We're talking about facilities that pull up to 2 gigawatts of power, use millions of gallons of water, and need massive grid stabilization just to handle the violent power spikes from AI chips. And we need to build cooling systems so huge they literally create their own micro-weather. If a foreign government bought this much land, this much power, this much silicone next to our nuclear plants and aquifers, every news outlet would be on the 24/7 meltdown mode. Because it's Amazon, we call it free shipping.
Behind me is the start of what will be the largest cluster of non-NVIDIA chips in the world. And Amazon's newest data center mega project, now fully operational here in New Carlisle, Indiana. These 7 completed buildings replaced empty cornfields fast, in about a year, and are filled with hundreds of thousands of Amazon's own custom Trainium 2 chips, and soon Trainium 3 across the US.
And move on. Everybody is obsessed with GPUs right now. NVIDIA, benchmarks, and model releases. But here's the twist. These new superclusters don't depend on that old GPU bottleneck. The biggest players are building their own chips, rewiring the software stack, re-engineering cooling, and literally reconstructing the power grid around private AI. This means Amazon, Google, and their friends aren't just cloud providers and chip designers. They are all of a sudden power companies, grid stabilization engineers, water barons, and nuclear-adjacent landowners. They're also landlords to the top AI labs on Earth. This is not a tech boom. This is a physical empire. Concrete, substations, transformers, cooling towers, all taking shape while Congress holds hearings about TikTok dancing. Here's the part nobody wants to say on camera. States build on agriculture. Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, Texas are being slowly converted into compute corridors. The land is worth more to a server rack than to a crop. Rural economies that used to depend on land will now depend on load, meaning the energy load, the cooling load, and the water load. This future is tied to seasons, but not to silicone, not to crops, but to clusters. And when the grid hits a breaking point, when a 40,000 person town in Iowa faces rolling blackouts or whatever shortages because the aquifer is feeding a machine city instead of the people, do you really think they'll shut down the multi-billion-dollar data fortress? Or will that town be treated like every other community sacrificed to mining, fracking, and industrial runoff before it? We all know the answer. This is where it gets dark. When a single AI cluster uses more power than 2 million homes, you don't regulate it. You reorganize society around it. Power becomes the new currency. Silicon becomes the new oil. And data centers become the new militarized zones. Who gets cut off first in a power emergency? The AI fortress that underpins banks, hospitals, the federal government, and the weapon systems, or your neighborhood? Once the private corporations own the systems that keep the machines alive, the public doesn't live in a democracy. They live in a digital dependency. And these structures don't go away when you vote someone out. The concrete is permanent. The substations are permanent. The water rights and transmission lines are permanent. Presidents and CEOs come and go. The dependency stays. But that's why they're moving so fast. By the time the public wakes up, the grid will already be written around them. This isn't just privatization. It's a transfer of sovereignty. From public systems to private empires, from elected accountability to corporate boards, from citizenship to subscription. While we worry about AI girlfriends and meme generators, the real game is who owns the data centers that run our jobs, our medical records, our mortgages, our credit scores, our elections? Who controls the power and water those data centers need to stay alive? Because once you're a hospital, your school district, your bank, your local government all depend on private AI clusters to function. Voting starts to feel less like power and more like customer survey. So here's the question almost above average wants you to sit with long after this video ends. Who controls the infrastructure your life will depend on? Not someday, not in 2035, but right now. Not the buzzwords, not the press releases. The land, the water, the substations, the silicone. Because once the grid is rewritten around trillion-dollar compute colonies, once farmland becomes motherboard land, once AI is the middleman between you and every institution that matters, do you still live in a democracy? Or do you live in someone else's terms of service? This is almost above average, where we try to call it how it is. Not innovation, but empire. Not progress, but a quiet coup over the basic infrastructure of your life. If you're tired of being treated like background noise in someone else's empire, hit subscribe and share this with your friends in rural areas and start asking these questions out loud. Who owns the future that we are about to live inside? And when are we going to demand that we have a say? I'm Chris McIntyre. This is Almost Above Average. This article was written by Substack author Anthony Christian. I will link to him in the show notes at the bottom. Hit subscribe and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.